Hey, Family Adventure, this is Sam, and I hope you're all doing really well, having a great week. Today, I'm bringing a new teaching from our Better Together teaching series. So I grew up in a small town up in Northern California, and I grew up being part of a small Bible church. And when I was in high school, I was still part of that same church. I was really involved in that youth group. And I had some friends who I went to high school with, and they were part of a different church, a different youth group. And this youth group that they were a part of, we didn't associate with. They had some different traditions, some different faith practices, and so we just didn't associate with them. But I was probably a junior or senior in high school, and I began to hear from my friends about all the things that God was doing in their youth group. And it seemed like there were some really exciting things happening. Their youth group was growing. People were showing up, and people were encountering God and experiencing transformation and change in their lives. And people were coming to having these faith experiences with God. It seemed like God was doing some amazing things in this church. And I knew, like, well, we don't really associate with them, but God's doing something really big over here. So I went to go talk to one of my youth leaders. I was like, what do you think about this? And I remember the response that he gave me. He said, Sam, he said, I don't even know if the people at that church are even Christians. And in fact, what's going on there may be demonic activity. And I was like, what? Like, this just doesn't even make sense. Like, they love Jesus and we love Jesus. They want to share the love and the goodness and the power of God in their lives, and we want the same thing. Like, it didn't make sense. Why couldn't we accept them or love them or care for them? Why couldn't that work? Why couldn't that happen? Well, today we're looking at this Better Together teaching series. We're starting a new, the message for this week is accept one another. We've been going through what it means to be a community, what it means to be a Christian community, and what it means for us as Family Adventure to really have that kind of intentional community. And we've been looking at these one another statements throughout the New Testament. Today, we're looking at this idea of what it means to accept one another. Romans chapter 15, verse 7, the Apostle Paul writes this. He says, accept one another, just as Christ accepted you, in order to bring praise to God. Accept one another. Now, when the Apostle Paul writes this, there's some division going on in this church, because he's writing primarily in Romans. He's writing primarily to Romans, to the Gentiles, to the non-Jewish people, but there's also Jewish believers there. Both these people are believers in Jesus. But the Jews say, there's certain things you can't eat and practices you can't participate in, where the Gentiles are like, well, no, you can kind of eat what you want and that's fine. And there's other divisions. Now, if you remember a couple weeks ago, when we've been talking about this, that there's incredible diversity in the early church, right? Different, racially it's different, culturally it's different. The faith practices that people grew up with are different, and they're all blended together and they're trying to get along, but it's not going so well. And so the Apostle Paul steps in and he says, accept one another. And this word accept, it's more than just to tolerate one another or put up with one another. It's much more powerful than that. In fact, it's more this idea of like aggressively receive one another, really embrace one another, welcome each other, invite each other in. And he's talking to people who are kind of at different ends of how they feel about things. He says, look, you need to accept one another. And he modifies his statement, accept one another, by saying, accept one another the way that Jesus accepted you. And so what does that look like for Jesus to accept us? And it's, really this idea, and he talks about it in Romans earlier, that Jesus loved us while we were still enemies, while we were still sinners, while we were still far from God, while we wanted nothing to do with him. He accepted us even then. And in fact, Jesus accepted us at his own personal cost. That he endured incredible discomfort in order to accept us. He went to the cross in order to accept us. He came as a human being in order to accept us, right? Jesus went out of his way to his own discomfort to accept us. And he says, this is what it looks like to accept one another. Accept one another the way that Jesus accepted you. So I just want to wrap up this idea with maybe with an example that maybe makes it a little more tangible for us. What does it look like to accept someone, to go out of our way, even at our own cost, our own discomfort, to really make someone feel welcomed, accepted, invited, a part of something? So when I was a youth pastor, there was a kid in our youth group, in our high school group, and his name was Jeff, and everybody loved Jeff. He was funny, and he was athletic, and he was smart, and he was creative, and he's that kind of person when he would walk in the room, like, he just brings energy, and he's the kind of person that people just liked to be around. Well, Jeff was part of my small group that met at our home every week, and there was another kid who was also part of our small group, and his name was Chris, and Chris was challenging. He was tough. He was difficult. He was awkward. He was argumentative. He would say things that were inappropriate at inappropriate times. And he wasn't just difficult for students. Like, for leaders, he was difficult. He was just one of those kids that just hard. And I remember Jeff came to me after a small group meeting one time, and he said, Sam, I think I really want to try to love Chris really well. I want to try to be a good friend to him. And so we did. And Jeff began to go pick up Chris every single week before youth group, before church. On Saturday, every once in a while, he would go and he would take Chris and they'd go out to breakfast together, and Jeff would pay for everything. He started inviting Chris to come and hang out with his friend group, which was uncomfortable and a little bit awkward. But he did this, for months. And it was interesting to see the transformation that began to happen in Chris, but also the transformation that began to happen with other people in our small group and other people in our youth group. They began to see, oh, yeah, well, I guess I can be nice to Chris too. I can accept him too. I can be kind to him too. And Jeff had to accept him and love him at his own cost. It was frustrating for Jeff. I remember him coming to me multiple times saying, I'm losing my mind. Like, this is so frustrating. I don't get it. And irritated, and it was his own money, and it was his own time, and his own energy. He put a lot of it out there to accept this kid. But it was interesting to see the way that our youth began to accept Chris and love him and care for him. Because one person said, okay, I'm going to accept this person. I'm going to accept him the way that Christ has accepted me. So I want us to have some discussion, whether it's at your home with another family or with your spouse, you're in a small group. Have some discussion. Here's a few questions that I'd love for us to talk about. First thing is talk about a time when you felt accepted. And what was it about that experience that was so different, that was so special, that made you feel accepted? Question 2 is this. What events from your past make it hard for you to accept others or to believe that you're accepted by Jesus? What are the events in your past that make it hard for you to accept others or hard for you to believe that you're accepted by Christ? Question 3 is this. What are the benefits of accepting others the way that Christ accepted us? What are the benefits for me? What are the benefits for them? What are the benefits for the church? What are all those benefits of accepting people the way that, accepting others the way that Christ accepted us? And the last question is this. Is there a way to disagree with others and still accept them? And what do you think that might look like? So I hope you have some great conversation and great dialogue, and hope you guys have a great rest of your week. All right, thanks.